Hi, I'm Mark McCulley, and I have a story for you today. This one is about two sons and a dad. It's actually a very famous story, and it's an old one, and you may have heard it before, but I'd like to give it a couple of new twists. So please come along with me and listen, and maybe we'll learn some things together. There was a man who had two sons. They lived on a large ranch out in western Kansas, and their mother had died, the man's wife, and it was just him and the two boys at this point. And they were both grown, they were adult men. And the two boys were quite a bit different. The older one was a hard worker, determined, worked many hours every day and every week, and wanted to make sure that he did his part and was very responsible to do the work needed around the ranch. The younger one was more of a free spirit. He was a creative. He loved to go out and do crazy things. And so the two boys probably didn't get along all that well. Well, after his 21st birthday, the younger son decided that, this ranch life really wasn't his deal. And so he asked his father if he could have his inheritance now rather than waiting. And so the father, very disappointed in his son, but him, sold off some of the land and some bonds and things like that, and gave his son a big bag of money. His son went out and bought a red pinstriped Corvette and prepared to go to the big city to seek fun and fame and fortune. So he took off one day, drove down the driveway of the ranch, and as he turned right, he yelled out the window, "So long, suckers!" And he drove to the town of Lost Wages, and there he sought his fortune and his fun. Well, immediately he had several new friends as he was in the casino, and they helped him decide what to bet. And he had slinky girls in slinky dresses blowing on his dice as he threw them at the craps table for luck. Luck didn't really smile on him very much, though, because, after all, he was from somewhere else. He didn't know the way things went there in Lost Wages, and so he continued to lose the money that his father had given him, and with one last roll of the dice, he had to give away the keys to his red pinstriped Corvette. And they took away the key to his suite in the hotel. So what's a man going to do? Well, he went out, and never having been much for hard work, he didn't really know what to do next, but he did find a job cleaning the toilets in the back of the casino where he'd lost all of his money. Wasn't a very good job, not a lot of hours, didn't really earn him a living, and so he could barely keep up enough money to have a small room in a flea bag hotel and very little in the way of food, and he was getting hungry and tired and didn't really enjoy the life he had now, after all. Well, one day, some months later, some of his stubbornness was starting to wear off. And he finally thought, I remember working on the ranch. All of my dad's hired hands at least had 3 squares a day, and they had a place to sleep at night. I know that this wouldn't sound good, but maybe I can convince my dad to give me a job. So on his way out the door, he started working on his speech. Got out on the main drag and started thumbing a ride. Meanwhile, the father, his dad, spent some time every afternoon sitting on the wide veranda of the main house, looking out across the driveway at the road where cars and trucks went by and wondered if he'd ever see his younger son again. Wondered if someday his son might drive back home. And so every day he spent time looking and looking and looking. He had divided up the property between his two sons, and so his older son was running the place now and working hard and all that, and he was involved still, but a lot of the time he just spent looking out across the field and down the road looking for his son. So one day, several days later, after the boy had left Lost Wages, the father was sitting looking out in the afternoon, as he often did, and he saw a pickup truck stop out on the highway and a lone figure get out and start walking up the long drive towards the main house. At first he couldn't make out who it was. He couldn't see well enough at that distance who was coming. But as his son got, which is who it was, his son got further up the driveway, within 50 yards or so, the father realized that that was him. And he jumped up out of his chair and yelled his son's name and ran down the wide steps of the veranda and started running toward his son, yelling his name. The household help came to the front door to watch because they heard the command to know what was going on. And there they saw the older man embracing his son, hugging him, sweeping him off his feet. The boy started into his speech. Well, Father, I'm really sorry. I've made a big mess of things, and I know I insulted you. So would you just take me back as a hired hand? And he got no farther than that. Then his father cut him off, stopped his speech, didn't want to hear it, and he starts dragging his son up the driveway towards the house as the household help was watching from the veranda, because by now all three of them were there looking out across the driveway at the boy. And the father starts calling to the household help. And he says, George, go out to the cooler, get that big choice beef that's been swinging and waiting for this special occasion, start cutting it up and get the big barbecue going. We're going to eat well tonight. Mary, I know you've been working on some extra things there in the kitchen. Well, today is your day to shine. Get them started, okay? Make enough for about 100. We're going to have a lot of people here tonight. And Bill, I want you to take my pickup, run into town, and go find that mariachi band that plays in the square on market days and get them over here. Hire them and make sure they come. And I don't care what it costs. We're going to have a party tonight. My son is home! My son is home! And then he tells one of the other servants, take my son upstairs, get him a hot bath and some new clothes, and burn these rags. I don't want to see them again. Bring the best out of my closet and give to him again so that he can be properly dressed as my son. And so then they all started making preparations for the party. And as they did, they continued to wonder just what was going on. All the hired help was going, but did you know the story? I mean, what was it like? What would it be like? Because he so insulted his dad, and now his dad's taking him back. Wow, that's amazing. Several hours later, just after dark, the older son, the firstborn, returns to the ranch, drives up in his big crew cab pickup truck, and he has to thread his way between the other cars that are now parked all over the place because the neighbors are here, the mayor, the city council, and various others, and some of the other relatives are driving in because they heard that the boy was home. And so the firstborn son finds a parking space, and the other men get out of the truck, the workers there that were with him. They get out of the truck and they walk toward the bunkhouse, and he sees the lights are on in the house. And the windows are open, and there's noise of conversations and laughter coming out, and there's music coming from somewhere, and he can smell the big barbecue on, and there must be something going on. Why wasn't he informed? Well, he'd left his cell phone turned off. After all, he was working. So he walks towards the veranda to go into the main house, and Bill meets him there on the step. Hey, it's... What's going on? Says the older son. Well, your younger brother has returned, and your father's thrown a big party. Everybody's here. Come on in. And then he saw the angry look on the older son's face, and he backed away and went back into the house, and a moment later, the father comes out. Son, it's good you're here. Your brother's home. And the older son, firstborn, looks at him and he says, what is the matter with you? Do you really understand what's going on here? That worthless, no-good son of yours took off with all that money and wasted it on fast cars and faster women, drinking and gambling and whoring around and who knows what else. And then he decides he wants to come home. And you throw a party. All these years I worked for you. I've worked my guts out trying to make sure that you were proud of me, trying to make sure to contribute around here. And what do I get? I never even had a goat roast in the backyard with my friends. And you throw a party? Don't expect me to come in. His father looks at him sadly and he says, my son, don't you understand? Look around you. Everything we have here is really all yours. I gave it all to you, and it's yours to do with whatever you want. But we have to throw a party. Don't you understand? Your brother, who was lost, has been found. Your little brother, who we thought might be dead, is alive and he's home again. We have to throw a party. And that's the end of the story. But I have some questions for you. Do you think the older son decided to go on into the party? Do you think he might have greeted his younger brother and well? What about the younger son? Did he settle into being his father's son again? Did he start working on the ranch? Did he get itchy feet again and take off again and decide that this life just wasn't for him and he just couldn't hack it? What about the father? Was the father able to persuade for peace between the two boys? Who do you identify with in the story? Who have you been at different parts in your life, perhaps different times in your life? Do you identify more with the father or the older son as the hard worker, or maybe the younger son as the free spirit? Why? What part do you find in the story for yourself? Who do you identify with? Who can you understand better? When have you been one of these? And who has been a father to you like this? Who has been this kind of father to you? How have you treated that person? Well, you may recognize this story as the story of the prodigal son, as it's often called. I like to think of it as the story of the amazing dad. It's been around since who knows how long. Jesus told it as one of 3 parables in Luke chapter 15, if you'd like to look it up. The first one is about a shepherd who has 99 sheep, loses one, leaves the 99 behind, and goes and finds the one and brings it home rejoicing. And he calls his neighbors to party with him. And then there's a woman who has 10 coins, maybe her dowry for marriage, and she loses one. And so she lights the lamp and gets around in all the corners in her house until she finally finds it and calls her neighbors in to rejoice with her because she's found her lost coin. And this third story, the story of the 2 sons, and the dad who was willing to put aside all of his pride and go welcome his son home. That's the third story in the string. In each case, the person looked for what was lost until it was found. In each case, Jesus is telling how important it is for God to welcome anybody home who repents, who wants to come home. The story of the shepherd, the story of the coin, and now the story of the 2 sons. He tells that story to explain how God the Father welcomes people who are sinners, because the righteous people around Jesus didn't think that he ought to be paying attention to people who were lost and bad and sinners. And Jesus said, "You don't understand. I came to find sinners and to save them." And the Father welcomes them home, and there's a party in heaven whenever anybody turns around and sees who God really is. And so he gave this story to illustrate the love of the Father who would welcome home even his wayward son and persuade even the son who thought that he had it all together, but really didn't. Because you see, the Father wasn't interested in hard work. The Father didn't care so much about good behavior. He wanted relationship. He wanted to be with his sons. And that was the most important thing for him. So what about you? Are you one of those hard workers? Are you one of those wayward sons? Whichever it is, it doesn't matter. God welcomes you home with open arms. He comes running down the driveway to see you, grab you up in his arms, and start the party. Are you ready? Is there anything holding you back? Today's the day. I'm Mark McCulley. It's time to turn around and see God for who he really is. Thanks for watching.